Hi, this is Craig Snyder, call sign Crunch, and this is Air Boss.
This is authentic.
All right, and welcome to episode 1 of the Air Boss series. I'm joined by Flash, I'm Crunch, and today we're going to talk about the V1 division or the flight deck cruise on a carrier. So Flash, welcome.
Hey Crunch, how you doing?
I'm doing good. So today we're going to go over some exciting stuff. We're going to talk about all the things that you probably have seen on the Discovery Channel and just don't know. So let's start off with some of the things that I get the most questions about, which is what do all the colored jerseys mean? What's with the different colors? Flash, can you walk us through some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're up there on the 10th deck, sitting right above the bridge, and you look down, and what do you see? And you got a bunch of Skittles running around. So our yellow shirts, right? What are our yellow shirts up to? They're the flight directors. They're the guys responsible for planning and moving aircraft on the flight deck. And they are supported by their blue shirts, who are yellow shirt wannabes, right? Mm-hmm. They're brand new in the Navy, probably fresh out of high school, can barely spell U.S. Navy or flight deck. They're super excited that they're out there doing the nation's business. But those guys are your chain gang, right? They're going to carry all those tie-down chains around. They're going to carry the chocks around. They're going to drive tractors in a lot of cases. And they're going to do the heavy lifting on the flight deck while the flight deck directors manage them and move airplanes around the deck in a safe and expeditious manner.
So all yellow shirts start as blue shirts in their career, right? That's how they learn and they progress up. So you start as a blue shirt. It's kind of like an apprenticeship where you learn how that works until you're ready to actually direct an aircraft.
Yep, absolutely. And then, those guys, once they finish their PQS qual to actually become a full-fledged flight director, then they kind of have a cool tradition where they will they have a whistle they wear around their neck, which helps signal each other and also their move crews regarding whether they want them to start or stop, et cetera. And those guys will get some very fancy braided whistle lanyards that there's generally somebody in V1 who sort of specializes in that on their own, privately on the side, right? And you will see some crazy good lanyard work hanging from around the neck of those guys once they get their final qualification.
And they're works of art. A lot of times it's like paracord or something like that they'll just put in this fancy weave with different colors and all sorts of things I've seen, right?
Oh yeah. It's pretty impressive, impressive stuff. But that's how you can tell you're fully qualified veteran flight directors from guys under training and et cetera. Do we want to limit it to V1 or do you want to go through all the colors?
Well, I think we go through all the colors only because a lot of folks have questions about it. And let's just talk about all the different roles that they might have.
Okay, so we've colored yellow shirts and blue shirts, and I think the next easiest color to handle is our green shirts, right? So from an air department perspective, the V2 division owns all the green shirts, and those are your maintainers, right? So for us, those are all the guys that maintain, guys and gals that maintain the systems, the catapults, the arresting gear, including all of the other all-ray gear that may not be so famous, the meatball, which is officially called IFLAWs, ILARTs, LSODs, what else you got? Mariah. And actually, they would not be responsible for Mariah, so we gotta. It's my thing, but it's not a it's not a green shirt.
It's
thing.
Your thing, but it's not a V2 thing.
Not a V2 thing. V2 does not work on Mariah.
Well, the other interesting thing though is green shirts is not just for air department. That's also the squadrons. So a squadron maintainer, whether you might be an engine mechanic or an aviations tech, you're also going to be a green shirt. So a lot of times you might see the green shirts mixed in because you're going to see green from the squadron or from the air wing, also from the catapults and the arresting gear. I think it's fair to say that the folks who are working the catapults and the arresting gear, a lot of times their jerseys are a little bit dirtier. Their float coats, they get a lot more grease on them. They are out there just slugging it out on the flight deck and grease is flying all over the place. It just tends to be that way. Not that that's not always the case with the squadrons, but there are green shirts in both the squadrons and in air department. What about the purple shirts?
Yeah, purple shirts are fuel guys, right? Our Grapes. They're out there hauling the hoses around and setting up, bringing the fuel from below decks to flight deck level, and making sure that aircraft are fueled up and ready to go for that next run. And I mean, when you're talking about a 5-wet Rhino, right? That is a ton of gas. I mean, I never flew a Rhino. I'd imagine you would know, but I think it's on the order of 25,000 pounds, right? I mean, it is a ton of fuel to get those things topped off.
Yeah. Well, a Tomcat was 20K. I've never flown a 5-wet Rhino. I've tanked off one, but that was it. I know they carry a lot of gas. That is true. That's true. Well, and then let's see here. Brown shirts. What are the brown shirts?
So brown shirts, we can contrast our brown shirts with our yellow shirts, right? Brown shirts are essentially the air wing version of the ship's yellow shirts, right? They own the airplane in terms of being a plane captain, right? And a lot of times you'll see a plane captain name on the nose gear door of the aircraft that they have. That they're responsible for, et cetera. Now, it doesn't always work exactly that way. Just because you have your name on an airplane doesn't mean that's the only one that you're ever going to take care of. But they're responsible for a lot of the pre-flight actions that go on with the airplane, whether it's making sure that the canopy is sparkly clear so that we can get a tally on those bandits out at range, or cleaning the exterior of the aircraft so you can reduce drag and maintain corrosion control, et cetera. But your plane captains work for the squadron, and they essentially own the airplane. They're going to run the pilot through his startup and pre-flight checks, and then they're going to turn it over to the yellow shirts, who will move the airplane around on the flight deck and get it in position to launch, and then put it away after she's recovered. So you'll never see a yellow shirt or a blue shirt working for the air wing, and you'll never see a brown shirt working for the ship. Those three colors are very specific to brown shirts working for the air wing or the squadron, and yellow shirts and blue shirts working only on the ship, the air department side of things.
Right. Well, and contrast that with white shirts and red shirts, the other two remaining colors. White is in white jersey generally is a safety. So in the squadrons, that's quality assurance. In the air department, you've got actually, does the LSO wear white? On the LSO platform, he's a V2 guy. Does he wear a white jersey? I think he wears white, right?
Well, yeah.
The LSOs do, but I meant the spotter.
Oh, yeah. No, the spotter works for V2 because he's a.
But does he wear green or white? I can't remember.
So it's funny. There's a couple of guys down there, right? Our V0 guy is technically a white shirt guy, or at least all of our V0 support were white shirt kind of, which also a lot of times is admin. Right, administrative support.
The admin folks, the folks in the tower, the folks who used to write backwards up in the tower and things like that, and they're all for the spotters down there. They wear the white. Also, quality assurance in a squadron tends to wear is also white, and safety, and that could be squadron, ship, air wing safety is all wear white.
Well, and the other guys that wear white are your medical personnel, right? So you'll see they'll be in white with a great big red cross, which is a little bit different. But when you look down from tower level, they're essentially white as well.
Yeah. Oh, and you bring that up. Public affairs also wears white, don't they?
Yeah. Which again kind of falls into that administrative support. Well, and then you get into the ATO guys, right? The air transfer officer, which when you said PAO, the next thing that comes to mind is, oh my gosh, the ATO, right? his job trying to get guys back, people back and forth, and cargo back and forth to the carrier onboard delivery C2, right? So
I can guarantee you that somebody's going to be commenting at the bottom of this thing going, hey, you forgot one.
You forgot. Yeah, right.
I spent 28 years doing this and you completely forgot about me.
Right.
But and then the last one, of course, is the red shirts. So the red shirts basically think fire and explosives for the red shirts. So that could be the crash crew. So up in on the flight deck, the folks who are basically firemen, they are blue shirts to yellow shirts to then red shirts. They become qualified to fight the fires. They're going to drive the little fire tractor. They're going to be basically manning the hoses. They're the folks who are there driving Tilly around, getting ready for all those mishaps out there. And they're the leaders of the hose teams and things like that. If I'm not mistaken, I may be speaking out of turn there on that. But also red is going to be ordnance, so that could be CAG ordnance, air wing Ordie's, CAG gunner, things like that. The arming guys on the catapult, they're all going to wear red jerseys and float coats as well. So that could red and white could be on both air wing, ships, either one. So it could be either. Awesome.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so great. So there's a nice little overview of the jersey colors. Probably the most common question that I would get is, what does it mean that somebody's wearing a different color? So let's move on. Let's talk about just, overall, Air Department in general. I mean, it depends on the ship and where you are in the training cycle and all that. I think it's fair to say that there's somewhere between 700 and 750 sailors in a typical Air Department. That's what I recall that we had on Ike. Is that about the number that you remember?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 600 plus, right?
Okay.
So when you're surging, you could end up with 700. I think an Air Department of 650 or so is. But it's always 600 plus. It's the largest department on the ship, right? And it's a ton of people that you as air boss are responsible for, which is why the air boss job is a post command tour, right? I mean, you're running a department that is 3 times, at least 2 to 3 times the size of a full-fledged combat squadron, right?
That is absolutely true. And it's a matter of fact, I mean, you think about it, in a typical fleet squadron, you have usually 2 master chiefs, 2 E9s. You'll have a maintenance master chief and a command master chief. And you get into Air Department and I mean, we had 3 just in the department alone at one point. You have a lot of leadership to look out for all of those different sailors. And I remember you as mini boss, of course, had to write a lot of evaluations. As mini boss. There was a lot of paperwork and a lot of PQS to sign. And I remember that the stack of paperwork that would be sitting on your desk I would go, wow, there's a lot of work going through his desk right now. And thank you for doing it all.
Yeah, and I know that's the more mundane part of the job or whatever, but I don't want to give anyone the impression that I was screening paperwork away from the boss. The boss had at least as much, if not more, blue folders crossing his chair. And it's funny because when the new air boss out on Ford took over and they brought him his first stack. Right, a former squadron commanding officer, or so his eyes just. Because he'd been out there training to do the physical part of the job, he hadn't really gotten into the administrative part of the job yet. And the V0, the admin chief, brought up his first set of 50 blue folders or whatever it was, and he just looked at it like, what do you want me to do with these? It's like, oh, I need those signed, and the sooner the better, please, sir.
Yeah. Anytime you want, as long as it's by lunch, is great.
Yeah, right. Yeah, don't take all the time you need. I've got these 50 are the high priority ones. You've got another 100 waiting for you on your desk that you can kind of get to, but sometime between today and tomorrow.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
What's really funny as we think about that is the high pace of the operations in the Air Department and the tower. You're constantly. We spend all the time thinking about the flight operations and what's going on with the air plan and getting the airplanes launched and recovered and what's going on with the gear. And then you turn around and there's the chief, and he or she just drops off 100 blue folders, and they just sit there. And then you turn around and there's the supply officer standing there wanting to talk with you about some thing that is really important to the supply department. And you're like, I have no time for this, but it's important. So let's figure out how to make it happen. Or, Smo calling to say, hey, I got this guy we need to talk about. The senior medical officer. The thing, you're bringing back some memories that I had forgotten about this. So
yeah, and I think for all those for all those youngsters out there that just saw Top Gun 2 and are all fired up to go raging around the skies. One of the presentations I used to do for high schools, et cetera, was I would bring in all of our manuals or at least representations of our manuals, right? Because there's secret TACMANs and stuff out there too.
Sure.
But you could easily fill a full-sized academic, wheelie cart, right, with your NATOPS manuals, your TAC manuals, your administrative stuff to do your ground job, right? And like, hey, look, just in case you're wondering, whether academics are important to your future desire, your future career, I'm telling you that you're going to spend 10% of your time in the air and 90% of your time here you go. Get busy reading and writing reports and keeping track of your people, right? Managing and interacting with your people, and that's what Navy leadership is really all about.
That's a really good point. I mean, we could do a whole episode on just the leadership aspect
right.
and things that we learned about that. I don't know that that's why our listeners tuned into this episode.
Right.
So I think we'll skip that for now, because you and I could write a book on that. So a lot of great things are for us to talk about here. One of the things that I think surprises people is the pace of the carrier. And what I mean by that is, it's a 24-hour day job when you're at sea. Even in port, it's a 24-hour day job. And there's a lot of times, during flight operations, in reality, there's kind of just one shift. A lot of times, sometimes they switch, but then over the night you got just the one night shift. What are you seeing now out on the Ford? How are they doing the shifts, and how many people are working in the daytime versus the nighttime?
Yeah. Not much has changed as far as the process goes, right? I mean, there's you got the operators, guys like you and me, and we got, if the airplane's active, we're going, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of actually managing flight operations and or maintaining or supporting flight operations, whether it's the directors or the maintainers or et cetera. Those guys are going all day long. And I think we'll get into an airplane discussion later, but
yeah, let's definitely do
just
that.
The airplane alone is 12 hours. And then you've got pre-flight, you got, pre-op, post-op, before those guys get a chance to head out. And then generally overnight, you're going to get the lion's share of your maintenance done, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's preventative maintenance or corrective maintenance, that's where your night crew is going to come in and try to put everything back together that the day crew broke.
Well, that's a good point. So that, you don't really think about it on a carrier a lot, that there's actual maintenance going on. I mean, it's obvious to anybody who's worked there, but if if that's not what you do every day, you may not realize that, that catapult, it fires during the day and it needs maintenance at night. It needs preventative maintenance. It means repair maintenance. Sometimes throughout the day, things break. And so there's a lot of work that has to get done in that overnight shift just to get it ready. So let's say that the airplane ends at let's say 10 o'clock at night, right? And the next morning, first launch is 8 a.m.? So you only get, after you respot and get maybe 10 a.m.?
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope it's not. It could be, but I hope not, right?
Yeah, I say that out loud. That's a little excessive, isn't it? That's not what we
try
do.
to go 12 on, 12 off,
yeah.
Right? As far as the airplane goes, understanding that our people we schedule 12 hours, they're really working 15 or 16.
That's a great point.
Right? Because they've got 2 hours on the front side, 1 hour on the back side. So that right there is 15 hours, right? Of kind of, hey, and then they squeeze in some meals, during that time and some breaks when they get a chance.
That's a great point. So how do you do meals on the flight deck? Let's say, I mean, if I'm a yellow shirt and I need to go get something to eat, what do I do?
Yeah, right. So it depends on how many bubbas are qualified to do your job, right? And I mean, literally, if you're in a CQ type environment where it's continuous operations, there is no pause or stop.
Yeah.
Then if someone can come relieve you at your post, great. You got a chance to get down and get some grub. If they can't, if you're the man or the woman, that's it. Which we saw. I mean, unless we've got a micro, we got to be there, right? There's no. Boss and Minnie have to be in the tower while flight operations are being conducted.
Right.
And until we get one of our shooters trained up as a micro, then that's it. So we have our food brought to us as we're operating. And those guys, if they get stuck on the flight deck, they'll usually have people deliver some food into flight deck control or something, so they can jump in for 5 or 10 minutes and grab something to eat before heading back out. There's usually those kinds of breaks available. And then of course during cyclic operations, where it's launch, recover, dwell. During the dwell time is when you want to go take a break and grab some chow, et cetera.
Yeah. So basically, like box lunches is kind of the order of the day a lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, great. So as we get ready before we bring some guests on and start talking about some of these things, let's go over some of the special names around the flight deck. Some of our listeners may have heard of all these different things, like the 1 row, the 2 row, the fighter row. I mean, there's so much, the landing area. There's so many different areas. So up on the bow, we've got, on most Nimitz class carriers, 4 rows, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, the 1 row through the 4 row. And that's just basically where you would line up the aircraft as they're parked, and they're blocking Cat 1 and Cat 2, right? And if you actually want to shoot off of those cats, you actually have to pull airplanes off of those. As you go aft, you're going to see what's there. The alley is right behind the JBDs, right behind the jet blast deflectors. And behind that, you're going to see the 6-pack and the fighter row, right? L1, L2, L3 on the starboard side, L4 on the port side. Those are the elevators.
Yeah, and you got the corral between the elevators.
Oh, yeah, good point. The corral.
And before you get to the elevators and the corral, you got the point, which is right up there, just starboard of Cat 1, right? You got that little sliver.
That's right.
You can hide an airplane depending on what it is. You can put a Rhino fore aft, or if you're not planning on using Cat 1, you can throw a Hummer up there, a Thor chips kind of thing. So.
Yeah, right. And then, of course, there's the shelf or the patio, I think I've heard it called before. I'm not sure if that's something that...
Yeah, yep. Depends on the size, right? Yeah. In general, but that's legacy term back there, just aft of L3.
Right.
On the starboard side,
yep.
The patio or the shelf. And then you work your way across to the fantail, the slash sitting right in front of the LSO platform.
Yep.
Right, and then you work your way around to the finger, which is just forward of the LSO platform, but outside the foul line on the port side. On Ford, they call that the glove because it's a much bigger area, so the finger moves to a glove
as opposed to the finger. It's the glove. All right.
And then as you work your way up that port side, you end up at the heat and the double heat. Where you generally want to stash your titler or your turning tanker last recovery,
yep.
and which ends up being your alert tanker for that last recovery at night when you haven't launched anybody to cover those guys. Right.
And just to be clear, the turning tanker last recovery, that's an aircraft that is configured as a tanker so that you can launch it in the event somebody can't recover on time and they run out of gas airborne. We can launch that guy. And he can tank that person who's low. Now, the funny thing about that, as I think about it, so if you're the pilot for the titler, the last one, you're the last guy with gas airborne. There's nobody to give you gas. So you launch to get somebody else recovered, and then it's on you to actually come back and land, hopefully first pass. So it's supposed to be I've never actually done that mission myself, but it looks like one of those where I'm like, that would probably be pretty stressful for me being the last guy airborne.
Yeah, and so who are your tanker pilots, right? They're always your senior cruise experienced, department heads, CO, XO, CAG, DCAG,
yep.
Kind of guys, right? And like I said, deployment experienced lieutenants, right?
Right.
The Nuggets are not running the tanker mission.
Right.
Because it is an incredibly important mission, and as you mentioned, you can't afford to have that guy go around and round, right? He's got a couple looks at it, before he's out of gas, and there's nobody left to give him any gas. So
yeah, I remember coming back to the ship one time. I think we were on like a 6-hour mission over Iraq, and we come back, and we were a little bit late for the recovery. But apparently they miscounted on the recovery. So this is, I think I was in 04 at the time, and we're coming back, and something was a little bit different on the radio when we checked in. It was just a little bit surprising. We were the only folks in the pattern. Hey, ready deck, and we landed. Boom, we land. We get on board. We get stuffed, and I get down to the ready room, and everybody was kind of looking around like, "Hey, dude, are you all right?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, nobody expected you to come back that recovery. They were surprised. They thought that you were on a different one. We were on the right one. They lost count. I go, oh, all right. well, we're here. They're like, yeah, but they landed all the gas. There was no gas. And we were working blue water numbers. So, of course, we're landing with like 3.5. There's no chance to bingo. We're below bingo and coming around with 2 looks at the boat or something like that. Because, of course, we have unexpended ordnance or something. We have no idea the stress that we're under. And we just come in and we break, we land, get stuffed. And everybody's like, oh, thank God. Everybody else was nervous. We had no idea.
Ignorance is bliss, right?
That's right.
That's where you do your best work.
Yeah, I probably still caught the one wire, but
hey, the professional's choice. Never pass up a good wire.
There you go. That's right. Oh, all right. So one of the things I do want to talk about is communication on the flight deck. So like we just alluded to it, that sometimes communication could get a little bit squirrely. You can get confused. Sometimes we lose track, we lose count, whatever. I think it comes as a surprise to folks that it's not all done by voice because, of course, it's very loud on the flight deck. You can't hear each other. You've got foamies in. You got double hearing protection with the cranial. But a lot of folks have a radio, but not everybody. So the yellow shirts have a radio. Flight deck chiefs in the squadrons. Most of the khakis, I think, on the flight deck have radios, and they have the ability to talk to each other. But everybody else doesn't have a radio, and they just communicate by hand signals. And They got special signals for where to send the airplane and what we're going to do, and hey, how do you get they make the waving sign with their hand to say fantail or whatever it is. I mean, it's rather impressive to me how they communicate. That said, when you're up in the tower, I mean, what are you seeing up there these days out on the fort? Anything different? Still the same?
No, flight deck hasn't really changed at all with respect to communication, right? So yeah, same hand signals going on, and same 5MC calls and same brick calls, through the coming through the headset.
That's a good point. 5MC, that's the loudspeaker from either the handler or the boss or Minnie just yelling at everybody. I say yelling, but it's a very loud speaker that you can hear even through your double hearing protection frequently. It also goes out over the radio, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't it? 5MC calls, do they go over the radio?
Yeah,
Maybe not.
I think this. Well, no, I think the SATC simulcasts, right?
Oh, okay.
So it depends on what you select. As to whether something is purely going to 5MC. And of course, the 5MC is distributed throughout all the aviation spaces on the ship, right?
Sure.
So all Ray Bosun's going to hear 5MC calls. Your gear dogs are going to hear 5MC calls. The catapult guys, VLA, all those guys are going to get a 5MC in their workspace in addition to your flight deck.
And that's a good point because you don't necessarily want it going on the radio every time because you might be working an MCON or something like that. And so you want that dyslexia. So any call on the 5MC might be something you don't want on the radio. That's a good point. Because sometimes that's important. We operate in a way that we don't want the bad guys to pick up our radio frequency transmissions. And that's just a thing. Yeah,
right. And a perfect recovery is zip lip, right? Nobody says a word. And we do it through a series of light and hand signals, both to the airplanes, to the aircraft, and to each other.
That's right.
And there are no emissions.
So, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Let's go down to the handler. So the handler is down at the flight deck level, which is the 04 level, right? Flight deck's 04 typically. I think Ford might be different, but in any case, the 04 level, and you walk right off the flight deck into the handler's flight deck control, where the handler's there, and he's got the Ouija board. And what is the Ouija board? Basically, it's a big giant model. It's like 6-8 feet long, and it's got all these little models of they're to scale, these models, so that you can move them around, and you can show where all the airplanes are, and they have different color codings to mean different things, and you could put a nut on there to show maintenance, or you turn it sideways to show that it's a comer, or you put a purple thing on there to show it's getting fuel. All sorts of different things that you do on this Ouija board, so you can just take a glance and say, I know what's going on. And while that's happening, you'll have a spotter who's one level above you, a V2 guy up in the ILARTS area who's talking by sound-powered phone down to the person at the Ouija board, and they're saying, hey, 101 is just moving up the LA, and he's moving up here, and so they move it on the Ouija board, and that guy's in the 6-pack, and they move him to the 6-pack, and that's how a lot of times people keep track down in flight deck control. Have they gone to a digital Ouija board yet in the Ford?
Yeah, absolutely. Ford is digital. I think there are a lot of legacy ships, if not all, that are digital as well.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it shows what I know. I mean, 10 years ago, it was still by hand.
Yeah. They call it the Flight Deck Management System, and it's part of ADMAX, or the Aviation Data Management and Aviation Data Management and Control System. We took backwards writing on the status boards, right,
Yep.
back in the day, and we turned it into a digital system, which kind of makes sense, and which gives information throughout the ship to all relevant parties. Kind of same information, same time as the concept, so you don't have to play telephone.
I remember that was ISIS at one point. Was the way you did that? Is that part of ADMAX or is that different?
Right. So ISIS is the flight information part of that system. In other words, who's airborne, what side numbers are airborne, how much gas do they have, and what are they doing, right? That's the flight administration operations side is ISIS, which has been transitioned to what they call FOMS now, or the Flight Operations Management System. Same thing, though. ISIS and FOMS, same thing. And then FDMS is the ground portion, or the flight deck portion of that, where it tracks all the little airplanes moving around the deck, and they literally have a sailor looking out of the ILR to the television studio window, right? And they are moving. They pick up a little model of an airplane with a cursor and move it around the flight deck as they see it physically moving. And anyone who's been on a carrier knows that handler, who is responsible for everything happening on the flight deck, right? His window is about what? The size of a submarine portal, right? I mean, it's like, he looks like 20,000 leagues under the sea in there. He's in this big metal box with this tiny little window, and there's usually a Hawkeye parked right in front of it, right? So he's got a great view of a turboprop engine or whatever, and he can't see anything else. So he really relies on that sailor to move the jets around the deck in the appropriate manner so that he can see where people are, and then he will direct his crew inside flight deck control to put the appropriate codes on them, right? Yeah. Whether it's a purple nut for fuel, or whether it needs ordnance or a wing spread spot, or whatever else he's trying to manage down there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good. So I remember, as you say that out loud, I remember there was a lot more going on with ADMAX. That's also going to include managing the maintenance for the all-ray system as well. Is that correct?
Well, I think at one time that was the thought. It doesn't do that right now.
Okay. All right.
But part of ADMAX is the ordnance plan,
yes,
right? So, and that's sort of an unrelated thing. And then I think it has some modules to handle weight and balance. A weight chit, right?
Yeah,
weight chits, which we were always dealing with, or wind chit. It's wind chit. Sorry, for us it's a wind chit. Right. So it had weights on it, but it was a wind chit. Right.
That's right.
And so that told us what kind of wind requirements each aircraft had to get airborne and to recover for that next recovery. And so you talking reminds me, right? ADMAX is your general situational awareness type system that the captain has it, air operations has it, we have it in the tower, the LSOs have it down on the platform, etc. And it puts a name with an airplane and what their fuel state is, where they are, etc. And a lot of times during like carrier qualifications, you'll see all of that pilot's landings and touch and goes, so you can keep track of how many they've got and how many more they need, etc. Right? So I don't know if you remember this or not, but I used to have Minimax on my windscreen right in front of me. Right? So my point is, I would take a marker. And I would fill the window in front of me with every event across the day for the entire airplane, which did a couple of things, right? It helped.
It was in a dry erase. You would take a dry erase marker and just write it on the window. Yeah,
dry erase marker.
Yeah,
I would just write it on the window, which did a couple of things, right? It helped us with our airplane study, because airplanes are not the easiest thing in the world to decode, and you had to be ready for problem children, right? Yeah. And by that I mean they throw a trap cat trap on there, or they throw an FCF profile flight on there, and those require special handling, right? And so if the last thing in the world you want to do is get surprised by a trap cat trap, and somebody's doing something. You're like, oh no! If you write it down, it's almost impossible not to see it.
Yeah.
If you just glance at the airplane and go, oh, all this stuff is on AdMax, whatever. Okay, there's a lot of trust there that everything's been entered properly, that nobody's missed anything, and like you mentioned before, did we miscount our aircraft coming and going?
Yeah.
Right. We're looking out the window. We know who left and we know who's coming back. Right. But the people running AdMax don't have windows.
Right. And it's just basically you're sitting there counting 1, 2, 3, and I've got a list of side numbers, and when they come back, done. And sometimes you get that's not always the reality out there, because sometimes things change.
Which reminds me of another. So I hope you'll appreciate this. Right, little sea story, quick sea story.
Sea stories are awesome.
Relevant, right? So I'm up in the tower alone. It's a beautiful afternoon, right? And you are off supporting a captain's mast or something. I don't remember. And I'm busy signing my blue folders between cycles and doing whatever else it is that gets done. And we get the call that we got a Rhino who's got an in-flight emergency. I don't remember exactly what it is, but this particular one required an emergency pull forward, and which is very serious, right? Essentially, an airplane wants to come home unscheduled, and the problem with that is we park all kinds of airplanes in the landing area between our cycles, right? For refueling and rearming and maintenance, and so I look down on the flight deck, and it's normal. We've got 8 to 10 airplanes sitting on the fantail in the landing area, et cetera. And now we got to move all those guys quickly without dinging them up, and to be able to recover this airplane. So Handler and I start coordinating. I try to get a hold of you to get you up there, and you got to get a hold of the arresting gear officer, start pre-flighting the wires, and making sure that you're calling CAG, make sure that you've got that he's aware that we've got tankers available if we need to. Are they off messing around somewhere, or are they overhead? And then and all the things, the crash crew, whoever we need to have on the same page, right? And so I'm running through all these things in my head. We're doing checklists. I'm calling people, yada yada yada. And in the middle of this, of course, the phone rings, and it's the captain. And I'm like, yes, sir. And he's like, hey, Flash, what's going on? And I'm like, sir, we've got an emergency pull forward for a Rhino. He's coming back, single engine with secondaries. He's shut the engine down. He's good for now, but he needs to get on deck ASAP. He goes, okay, great. If only we had a system that would tell everyone all at the same time what's going on. Do you think you could do something like that? And my brain has exploded at this point. And I'm like, well, sir, I mean, if you want me to start a log, I could start a log, or, and I'm thinking the whole time, I'm like, why are you bothering me with these things? I've got a lot to do right now, Skipper. Now is not the time to be having administrative discussions. He's like, no, I'm not really thinking about a log. I'm thinking about something that might let everybody on the ship know what's happening, so that they could all take the appropriate actions as soon as possible. And I just, I'm silent. And he's like, hey, can I get an entry on AdMax? And I'm just like, tower soup, 205, left engine fire, please, thank you. Right?
Yeah, oh, wow, that's so funny. Oh, that's funny.
So it's an administrative system, but it's critical to flight operations in that sense, and it really is. It was a major step forward when we got off the grease boards, and started using an electronic format to communicate to all of the relevant air authorities. Hey, this is what I got going on, and this is the status of the air wing or the aircraft airborne at a glance.
And I think you bring up a great point. It's not just us looking at that. All the air wing, all the squadrons are looking at it. All the squadron maintenance are looking at it. So if you're in VF 143 and you're down in your maintenance control and you look up there and it says 101, hydraulic failure, you're like, oh. Well, 101's coming back with a hide failure, Airframers, get up
Right.
there. You know, we get ready to meet the airplane because we can see that it's coming in. And everybody knows, oh, we got a possible hydraulic failure. And everything that means for towing out of the LA or blocking maybe the wing. Next question is, are his wings going to be able to fold? You know, all the different things that you have to think about as we work through the system. But awesome discussion. I love the sea stories. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit, Flash, and talk about just what our typical day looked like. I mean, so you and I we'd stand up there 3 feet to the left and right of each other for a dozen hours at a pop, coming and going and everything like that. But there's a lot more to it than just looking outside the window and talking on the radio. So, I know that most carriers, the Airboss and the Mini, have a stateroom that's up in the tower. Now, when we were on the Ike, your room had been given up. They took yours away, and you had to live down on the O2 level, as I recall. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I think I was on the O3, but it doesn't matter. It was up that, I think what was it, 67 steps of pain there to get from the O3 up to the tower.
Yeah. So every morning you had to go climbing up the stairs, and every morning I would wake up and frequently I'd have to go down the stairs and go down and see the CO or somebody like that first thing in the morning. Like if there was a department head meeting, usually that'd be 8:00 in the morning, and I'd be down there sitting there talking about stuff that I did or did not know anything about, and and you'd be up in the tower. And you'd be, getting everything ready for event 1, right? And so, I know that like a lot of times I'd wake up at 6 a.m., whatever the case is. Let's make up a number. I don't remember. I'd get up and I'd try to move a little bit or something, get on a treadmill if I could. And I swear by 6:15, my brick is calling. There's All Ray Bosun telling me what's going on with the maintenance, giving me an update on the catapults and the arresting gear and saying, hey, Cat 2's down, won't have it up till event 3, all sorts of crazy stuff. And that means that I got to call the captain and let him know what's going on. And it's not even 7 a.m. yet. So I know that I would get going and get started pretty early. I know you did as well. But you would get up into the tower probably an hour before event 1. Right. And so let's say event 1 was like at 10 a.m. You might be getting up in the tower at 9 o'clock or so. Is that about right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
And so how would your day start getting the flight deck ready or getting the tower ready?
Yeah. So, I mean, my total focus, right, when the show up is, are we going to launch jets on time? And the sign of a well-run air department / aircraft carrier / air wing is that when, let's say like you said, flight schedule starts at 10:00, you've got an airplane off the front end on the bells, right? So while they're ringing the bells down on the bridge, which are the bells associated with each half hour on the ship, right? When you hear the bells, there ought to be a jet making noise off the front end of your ship, right? And that's it. And is there anything that's going to prevent us from doing that? And of course, what is the number one reason that doesn't happen? Rule number 1. Do you remember what rule number 1 is?
Helos.
Yes, sir. See, after all these years, it's still there at the top of your brain housing group, right? Rule number 1. What is going to prevent me from being successful today? Helicopters.
Just to be clear, that's not the exact phrase that you would use.
No, that's right. The helos will always F you. That's right. The helos will always F you. Yeah, and no disrespect intended to my rotary wing brethren and sisters, brothers and sisters, right? I mean, clearly, if we don't have... So one of the reasons that the helos will always F you is because you cannot go flying without them. Mm-hmm. And so if something goes wrong with a helicopter, you are hosed unless you have an accompanying battle group that can either throw up a helo from one of the small boys, or the small boys can get to plane guard, or you've got C's that are calm enough to man a small boat, a rib, right? And you can set up. And our helo requirements were we had to have a helicopter airborne, and then we had to have a second helicopter on alert 30, right, in case we lost somebody. And so if you didn't have those things, your day just got infinitely harder. right? So the first thing that I was worried about was, what is the helo plan? What is going on? Am I seeing good things when I look out the window? Am I seeing maintainers crawling all over a helo, or am I seeing blades spinning? If I see blades spinning, hey, we're off to a great start. If I see panels open, then I'm immediately making phone calls down to handler and CAG and saying, hey, what's up with 710 down there?
Yeah.
Like, are we? Is this a momentary thing, or is this a big deal? And when are we going to make the call to tow that guy palm tree, or whatever we need to do to get him out of our, off our catapults, right? Because that's where they're sitting. They're sitting on the catapults. So not only can you not go flying because they're not airborne, but even if you solved all of your problems and got a destroyer in plane guard or had a rib, etc., you've got to get him off the catapult just to be able to launch somebody.
Yeah.
Right. So that's thing one is what are the helos doing? If the helos look good, then the very next thing that I would transition to is how's the tower looking pre-flight wise, right? Now, the people that work directly for us, the white shirts, the V0 gang, they were awesome, and they would get up there and pre-flight the tower a couple hours prior, which was supposed to include comms checks, etc. But I wanted to know that when I put on the headset, I could talk to somebody, because that was the most important piece of equipment that you and I had. We don't have a radar up there, right?
No.
All we've got is our eyeballs and our radios.
That's right.
So if you hit the SATSI button and nothing happened because they changed the comm plan overnight, or any one of 1,000 different reasons why your radios are not currently working, your life, again, just got exponentially harder.
Immensely harder. That's right.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was because the headset little thing didn't work, and you're just thinking I remember thinking like, oh my God, the whole thing's blown up. Like, oh no, my headset's just bad, which is that's so much easier to solve. That's great. But, that's a great point, because you're sitting there, you say comm check, you're like, that sounds pretty easy. It's more than just checking one radio on one handset. There's multiple headset, there's multiple radios, there's multiple basically radio heads. You got the SATSI, you've got manual radios, as I recall. There's there's so many. You got to check the 5MC. You're checking you got a phone going to the captain. You got a normal phone calling around the ship. You got bricks. You got all sorts of different things that could go wrong. And you're just saying, hey, I just want to make sure my radios work. And there was always something that wasn't working.
So you remind me of a story. I remember seeing an NBA player that came out to fly with the Navy. And this was years ago. I mean, I'm talking 25, 30 years ago. He's sitting in the back of a Tomcat, and there's a news crew there filming him, and the fluffer's up, showing him how to run the OG9 and get the systems turned on in the back seat, et cetera. And the guy, the player turns around. I wish I could remember who it was, but he turns around to the Rio who's working with him, and he says, you don't know what all these buttons do. And I mean, they're literally, hundreds of circuit breakers, buttons, knobs in the back seat, etc. And the guy looks, he says, "Oh yeah, I do." And I was like, "Yeah, I do know what all those buttons do." Except now transition that to the tower, and you mentioned, you look overhead at those speakers and the radios and the 4 billion buttons up there. No, I did not know what all the buttons did, and I did not know. But one of the most frustrating things that could happen is that a speaker is either making noise or not making noise, and you can't figure out what radio that speaker goes to or how to make the radio go to that speaker. And you're like, yesterday it was fine, and now today I can't hear a goddamn thing anywhere.
And I remember there were times when that would happen, and you'd be over there being going, who checked the radios? Where is this going? It was fine yesterday. Why is this broken? And we'd be over there trying to launch airplanes, and you're over here just trying to figure out how to make the noise stop.
I either need to make it make noise, or I need to make it not make noise.
Right.
And it's the simplest damn thing in the world until it's not. Right.
My God, that's so true.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, and then some of those rolled radios and some of the things that you would see either on the overhead, especially on the older ships, they are old radio systems. And you look at these things and you go, that looks like it's from, that could be in the movie Ensign Roberts and it'd still be accurate. And that is an old looking radio. that can't actually still do anything. Oh, no, it still works. It still does something. And there's some radio up there that allows you to switch and turn. You're probably looking at me like, what do you remember? I remember having something up there that was old, and I never knew what the hell it did. I'm like, I don't know how to use that.
Yeah, and you remember those handsets, right? That, I mean, you know, where where when you stowed them, when you secured them, you kind of slid in the head and then popped in the tail, right? And it was basically a friction type system, and you'd get that kind of cool look. You grab it and you'd have this entire telephone thing hanging off your head while you were talking. A lot of times the reps used that handset as their method of communication with the airplanes, right?
Yeah,
you gave the tower flowers the old telephone type handset to use. So, quick C story for Ford. A couple air bosses ago, Metro is sitting in the left seat, and he's doing CQ, and one of the overhead speakers squawks at him, and I mean really loud, like annoyingly loud, right?
Yeah.
And I can't remember what it said, but whatever. It makes a lot of noise, and kind of startles him a little bit, and he turns around, looks in that general direction, reaches up, grabs what looks like a volume knob and turns, kind of shoves it off and whatever, right? Goes back to doing his business. About 30 seconds later, the same speaker goes off again, right? And now so now he goes to examine said box, right? And he gets up close to the box, and now he's like, okay, is that the volume knob? Where's the on off switch? What channel how do I, so he changes a couple of knobs, and he looks at it, and he goes back to work, right? And it, boom, hits him again, right? And he's like, okay, and tower soup, da 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 da, and our V0 guy gets over there, starts messing with some stuff, and he's like, okay, sir, you're good to go. And 30 seconds later, it goes off again, and now he's beside himself, right? Because he's not having an effect on the system. So he ends up reaching up and just grabbing the power cable and ripping it out of the box. And it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Now, not necessarily funny for the maintainer that's got to put it back together, but and as an illustration, and I gotta say, Metro was a level-headed guy. I mean, he was not a fly off the handle kind of a guy, but it was a great illustration of, I've got something very simple. It's a speaker, right? And my theory is that the first couple of times he was actually playing with the wrong speaker.
Yeah.
And then by the time he got to what he thought was the right speaker, they were on the wrong knob. And then by the time that, the final thing happened, he's like, I mean, that's it. Like, I got to make it stop making noise because it's affecting essentially safety of flight, right? And I'm just going to turn it off the old-fashioned way.
Right. Well, it's going to work that way. And so, did you ever figure out what that speaker did?
So no, this was recently when I was a civilian. So this is not my problem, right?
You observed it. I'm sure you observed it.
I get the entertainment value, but I don't get the stress associated with. I better figure out what's going on, right?
Right.
That's a combat systems problem. That's a combat systems thing. It's not something. It's not all Ray equipment. I don't have to worry about it.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome. Thanks for listening. This is Airboss on Authentic Production.
Thanks for listening to this free episode of the Airboss series from Authentic Media. To find more great ad-free content, check out Authentic on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Acast. Links are provided in the show notes below.